going to be a busy week for the United Nations without question. There's a lot to discuss here, so let's bring in Peter Zalmayev. He's the director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative and focuses on strengthening ties between post-Soviet countries and the West. Peter, thanks for being with us tonight.
Pleasure, Jonathan.
So first off, I want to get personal with you because you have family in eastern Ukraine, correct?
Yes.
And tell me, have you been in touch with them? What are their thoughts about all the developments?
I am in hourly contact with them. My brother, my mother, they have been extremely concerned. The situation seems to be spiraling out of control. There are skirmishes, daily skirmishes in my hometown. There have been several deaths in the last 2 days of this conflict. And
because
so
they're from Donetsk. I mean, which we've seen in the news repeatedly.
Exactly. They're from Donetsk, and I'm trying my best to try to keep them calm, but the situation does not warrant calmness.
What are they afraid will happen?
Well, they're afraid, first of all, that even short of an invasion by Russia, and mind you, Russia is right now, as we speak, massing large reinforcements outside of the eastern borders of Ukraine, that these skirmishes will actually lead to a complete disorder in the city, a complete massive unrest that could result in all sorts of calamities.
Because when you talk about these skirmishes, you're talking about what we see, which is, not right now, but what we've seen in the past, which is demonstrators that have stormed government buildings,
Exactly.
Fights in the town square. So they're afraid that it might spread beyond the town square and turn into riots and looting.
Mind you, you have to consider the sort of people that are actually instigating these skirmishes. We hear reports of thugs being bussed in from Russia, and other elements within the society in Donetsk who are behind the unrest.
So that being said, the thought from Russia is that so many people in eastern Ukraine are scared for their safety, are concerned about their security, and want Russia to come in and ensure law and order. Does your family think Russia should come in?
No, they do not want any sort of invasion. I think that most of the problems that Ukraine has faced with the Russian-speaking minority can be resolved internally. The language issue, it has been thorny, but it has been resolved successfully before. Nothing in eastern Ukraine has so far justified Russia's involvement. I'm afraid this is all instigated by Russia, and Russia is actually actively fabricating facts on the ground to use as a pretext for potential invasion.
Do you think it's a real possibility, and does your family fear it's a real possibility that Russia may move into eastern Ukraine?
I think it is, and in fact, there are already credible reports that an invasion may be imminent shortly after the referendum tomorrow in Crimea.
So the expectation is that once Russia gets Crimea through this referendum, which is largely assumed will happen, that they'll try to move further into eastern Ukraine?
At the very least, you just cannot rule that out.
Scary for your family, I'm sure. Talk about the elections, though, in Crimea. Do you get the impression this will be a free and fair election? We just saw Nick's report that seems to imply the opposite, but do you think that most Crimeans will have their voice actually heard?
Well, considering the massive disinformation campaign that Russia has waged in the run-up to the referendum tomorrow, it's already biased and prejudiced, and so it cannot be a free and fair process. But having said that, the majority of the population in Crimea have been pro-Russian, and most of them are Russian speakers. So there's a large degree of sympathy for Russia, and I do believe that even in a free and fair election, the Crimea might vote for annexation.
So your group focuses on the bonds between post-Soviet countries and the West. How would you describe the relationship between the West and Ukraine's new government right now?
Well, the relationship is such that, first of all, the acting Prime Minister Yatsenyuk was in Washington this last week.
I guess what I'm getting at is, do you feel like the West is doing all it can to help Ukraine, or do you get the impression Ukraine's new government feels very alone right now?
I think it has actually been doing quite a bit, and I think the promise of significant financial aid is something that is very important. The IMF has promised upwards of $15 billion. U.S. is also chipping in $1 billion. More is forthcoming, considering that the new government found its coffers completely empty after the the former president was done with with them. I think this is very important for the government to continue to be able to pay pensions and salaries. So this is extremely important.
And not to mention the promised sanctions against Russia.
The promised sanctions, that remains to be seen if the West, if the U.S. and EU can act in concert and adopt sanctions across the board.
Okay, Peter Zalmayev with Eurasia Democracy Initiative. Thank you for coming in tonight.
Thank you, Jonathan.
We appreciate it.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you.